The Remnant are a people ravaged by time and grief. In the first age, Remnant lived on a beautiful world called Haven. It had mountains and forests and crystal clear blue oceans and rivers. The Remnant lived here in peace and at one with nature. Granted the gift of flight, these sentient birds lived in beautiful cliffside cities overlooking the abundant forests below. It wasn't until they began to revere this flight as a gift from God that they ever dreamed of leaving their world. The Remnants' religious beliefs date back to very early in their history, though countless reformations in their belief led to the rise of a God King whose name has been erased from history. The God King believed that flight was a divine gift intended to spread the glory of God to the stars. To this end, he created ships and sent missionaries into the stars to preach their religious views to every species they would encounter. The Remnants' God King believed he was doing no harm. The first group of missionaries to encounter alien life encountered the Andronians, a species living on an over-industrialized world where the pollution had made the air and water toxic. The population had been forced to begin modifying their body, becoming more machine than biological. The Andronians were resistant to the missionaries' tales of a god, so the Remnant offered a few rogue Andronians the chance to live on worlds without such toxic air if they would reprogram the massive computers that controlled the Andronian implants. This forcefully instilled the Andronians with religious zeal and created the first standing army of disposable troops for the Holy Kingdom. The missionaries' actions would continue to go unchecked as they used their armies to oppress other worlds and force them to worship their God King. It's uncertain if the Remnant leader actually approved of the actions of the missionaries or not, and historical records seem to have mixed reviews on this. During the peak of the Holy Kingdom, they held the largest interstellar empire of their day, spanning 37 different inhabited worlds across 36 different stars. Their fleet was remarkably ahead of its time, traveling from star to star using internal wormhole generators, and they would use their space superiority to strike defenseless ground targets from space. When they were forced to engage in ground combat, the bulk of the fighting was done by conscripted zealots rather than the Remnant soldiers. This elevated the Remnant, giving their followers the false idea that they were exceptionally skilled heroes, when in reality the bulk of the forces were simply expendable conscripts. Two major mistakes in the first age led to the downfall of the Holy Kingdom. One was the failed siege of Fiara. Fiara was protected from orbital bombardment due to the entirety of life on the world existing in underground volcanic caverns. This required direct infantry assault on Fiara without the Holy Kingdom's best asset to aid them. The Fiarans had fought countless civil wars and internal conflicts, and the arrivals of the invading forces only served to amuse the Fiarans at best. In the initial assault, more than 20 billion zealots lost their lives on Fiara, either to the environment or to the natives. A single ship fled Fiara, only to crash and land on Antioch after this failed assault. Though nobody survived the crash on Antioch, a single robotic support unit named Sentinel-003 was repaired by a Salat. The mission of the Zealots was quickly understood, and this would lead to a long and stealthy campaign by the Salat to destroy the Holy Kingdom. I will get into this more when I discuss imperial culture. What does matter is that very early victories by stealthy Salat forces were attributed to the Fiarans due to the overwhelming victory they had in defending their world. The Fiarans were branded as demons, and the Holy Kingdom blamed all manner of issues on them. Paranoia, distrust, and hatred spread through the subjugated worlds, and the Holy Kingdom began to lose its grip on the people. The religion of the Holy Kingdom remained strong until the end of the First Age, when a joint assault on Haven by the Fiarans and Salat working together crushed the capital world and the religious empire. The Empress of the Salat slew the God King, destroying his body entirely. Though she was blinded in the process, all records of his name were wiped from memory. Speaking the God King's name was outlawed, as was following his religion. Those who remained loyal to the fallen god were hunted down and executed. For the next 100 years, this would include any remnant that were found by anyone. The remnant today are scattered across the stars. Some have integrated into imperial society, turning away from their religious views to live among people who are still distrustful of them. Many others have a deep connection to their religious views. Some seek to bring their God King back to life, even though none know his name. Others have formed violent factions that often are oppressive terrorist cells, operating outside the laws and generally outside of civilized space. Nearly all Remnant face a universe filled with people who hate and distrust them for the actions of their ancestors. Even though their empire fell generations ago, many of the older races still hold the actions of the Remnant fresh in their minds. Surprisingly, the Remnant's religion was not monotheistic. In actuality, they believed in the existence of 12 creator deities. However, they mostly worshipped the one they believed to be their god king. While the most common violent sects of Remnant usually still worship their dead god, some have gone to worship a few of the others. This has led to some rather unique cults popping up in the fringes of space, as well as some interesting changes in the behaviors of these cults. Generally, any member of these religious factions will face extreme hatred and direct violence from the Salat Empire. The dead god, or the Forgotten One, is their god king. His name has been forgotten, though his belief states that he favored his winged children he created. The general belief is that he formed the universe to protect all of the gods from the all-consuming hunger of the devourer. Arathel, the Lady of Compassion, was believed to be a goddess who feared her own power. She put herself into an endless slumber as soon as she learned there was life in the universe, fearing that if she even gazed upon them, she would cause them harm. Out of all the gods, she likely has the most compassion for mortals, seeing their lives as important. Nelzul is the Lord of Rot. He's said to rule over an afterlife that beings with a hint of magic head to when they die, so that their power can be recycled into the universe. He's not so much revered or worshipped as he is understood to simply look after this afterlife. Interestingly, the Remnant don't believe beings not given a small portion of magic or affected by a small portion of magic have any afterlife, as it's believed their normal decay is enough to recycle their matter into the universe. It's believed that Nelzul was killed by the Devourer before the God King was slain. The Lady of Darkness was said to be a manipulative goddess whose voice could be heard by few. She would never lie, but any truth she revealed was only done so with a clear purpose behind it. She sought to manipulate and control others, and sought to use mortals in her schemes to overthrow the other gods, or to use them to protect her against the Devourer. Fury was a paranoid and prideful warrior who told the others that he would make the strongest weapon ever. He called it the Axe of Fury and said this of it: "I shall forge it deep within a frozen fortress, heated by the flames of the molten core of the world, and quenched in bitter cold of permafrost. I shall douse it in blood, and never let its thirst for combat end, making it stronger with every blow it deals. It shall be fast and mighty, cleaving all those you pathetic other gods craft." Interestingly, Fury had no real qualms with the Devourers, seeing it as a natural end to weaker beings. He sought to be the strongest through fighting. The name of the god, a hidden knowledge, is lost, or at least well hidden. What is known of him is his extreme greed. While this god could in theory provide the mortal with anything they desired, the time, the effort, the cost of getting the god to do so was always greater than if the mortal had used any other means to meet the same goal. In a way, he's a cautionary tale against taking shortcuts, warning that anything that seems too easy is likely going to involve far more effort than you may think. His tale encourages mortals not to worship or even seek him out, for doing so will only make them work twice as hard as simply pursuing their own goals. The Devourer is the last god known about. To call it a god is a bit misleading, though. The Devourer exists outside of the gaze of the other gods, and does so with an unending hunger. It seeks one thing for certain, and that is to consume the other deities. It's believed that the Devourer is immune to the powers of the gods, but can never meet their gaze. Without space or time to hide in, the Devourer had free rein to consume, and because of this, the other gods created the universe and scattered their gaze through it. The Devourer was forced to hide in places so bright that no god could look at them, and placed in places so masked in shadow no god would look at them. Should the gods ever let down their guard, or their gaze fade from vigilance, the Devourer would consume them. A few interesting things to note about the Devourer are that it's believed the Devourer killed and ate countless deities before the creation of time and space, because there was no way for these beings to look at the Devourer. It also explicitly mentions that the only limitations to the Devourer is that it can never let its gaze meet that of one of the gods. This means the only thing that we know this thing cannot do is look at a god who is looking back at it. A few modern cultists have proposed that if this entity chose to inhabit the body of someone and made them blind before they made eye contact with a god, this would give the devourer free reign of the universe. While cults of the devourer are exceptionally rare, many of these point to the being consuming Nelzul prior to the death of the God King. The rumored powers to control the dead of the Empress prior to killing the God King, and her blindness, as the Empress herself hates all religion, including movements that worship her. These cults, even if they directly worship her, are met with violence by the Salat. Texts of the other gods have been lost to time and war. Even if texts may remain hidden somewhere on Haven, that world is now a radioactive wasteland filled with ruins and countless dangers. It is generally avoided despite being deep within Imperial territory, even by the most bold and adventurous outlaws. Even robots flying over the surface of Haven don't seem to do so without issue, many ending up crashing onto the surface of the planet. The general explanation for this is the high levels of ionizing radiation still present, throwing off the various sensors and communication systems. This explanation is a perfectly viable one. A small thing to note is that the Remnant's God King did demonstrate real power, according to many historical records. Magic, while exceptionally rare in these records and usually only held by gods, is exceptionally powerful. Various historical articles verify some of these feats, though in modern day none seem capable of being replicated. Some modern-day historians have begun to doubt the records that imply the power of the old gods is real, while others argue that the evidence of them having been real is too overwhelming. If their god king was in fact a real god, as it would be implied by these records, then the Empress killed a god attributed with creating the universe. The Empress refuses to confirm or deny that any gods ever existed, and reminds scholars who ask that the worship of any god, living or otherwise, will result in immediate and painful execution. She has repeatedly stated that the reason for her immortality is technology, despite this technology not existing until fairly recently.